This week we are talking about psychic vampires. Fun topic. Now that Halloween is over, we can get back to Halloween, right? So the topic of psychic vampires comes up a lot in occult circles, as does the topic of psychic attack. This has always puzzled me to some degree, and but eventually I began to notice that it's kind of an outgrowth of doing regular banishing work. So such that the various complexes you have going on within you begin to manifest around you. And the way this can come about is that you begin to see your own traits mirrored in the environment around you. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean those traits are not out there. They most certainly are when you see them. So the traits that you have, that other people have, you begin to notice your own, let's say, flaws or hang-ups as they arise in the people around you, because the various hang-ups we have are pretty much shared. We're all pretty much the same species. There is a collective unconscious, apparently. So the tendency arises then that we enter this sort of headspace where we begin to see psychic vampires or people out to get us all around us. There's a sort of paranoia that can come about from doing this sort of intensive daily banishing work that comes along with the Golden Dawn curriculum in the Outer Order. Okay, it's one of the side effects of doing the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram and the middle pillar work, and also the banishing ritual, the hexagram. So there's a tendency to see vampires as out there, and we might literally believe that people are capable of leeching our energy, sort of like a literal vampire would leech your blood. And these people tend to be sort of black holes of need. It might be somebody in your family who has recently become an invalid, or they have a terminal illness and now you're taking care of them until they die, and they seem to be draining you of energy. It's as though as they slip into oblivion, they're kind of sort of sucking the energy out of you and taking a piece of you along with them, something like that, right? Then we have these people. There are also people who are not invalids, but they are sort of emotionally crippled. The narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths. These are people who suffer from antisocial personality disorders. These three being the main ones: narcissist, sociopath, and psychopath. These people essentially suffer from alexithymia, which is a lack of full spectrum of emotion, or a lack of a full spectrum of the awareness of emotion, which is really interesting too, because what happens, they will actually latch on to people around them who do have a full spectrum of emotion, but who have the same or similar hangups to that to what they do. Okay, so they might become dependent upon people around them who are more sensitive than they are, and it's almost as though they are preying upon them, feeding off of their emotional energy or something like that. Right? This is not exactly what's happening. The best way to look at this is that if you have two people, each person is a biological entity, and each one is arising in this physical plane as a biological entity. And as such, they pretty much are drawing from some kind of wellspring of upwelling life animating principle, right? They are both basically doing that. And so as they both co-arise together, they really don't have much to do with each other's energy. unless they would literally latch onto the other person and literally suck their blood or eat their flesh or something like that. Okay, so there's really not very much going on between the two people. So it's not really possible for somebody to drain your energy, but it most certainly is possible for it to feel like they're doing that. Okay, so somebody who has one of these disorders, let's say they're desperate because they're an invalid, or they are emotionally crippled like a narcissist or a psychopath. Um, these people will tend to cling to what they think is real, and they tend to be very literal in their very surface world. Very what you see is what you get. Okay, now this should be a heads up, because remember that somebody who thinks in terms of vampirism might take that literally and then think that, oh, there are people out there who can actually drain my energy. Got to watch out for them, right? That's literalistic thinking. And that sort of literalistic thinking is the same kind of thinking that these alleged psychic vampires engage in. Okay. The kind of thinking that would see a world full of enemy psychic vampires, it's the same kind of thinking that these alleged psychic vampires engage in. Okay. So very often when people say, I'm being psychically attacked I'm in a relationship with an energy vampire, um, well, that complaint itself is the kind of complaint that an alleged psychic vampire would make. Takes one to know one. Okay. Just as if somebody complains about theft all the time, you might want to watch your wallet around that person, because what they expect to see out in the world is what they have going on with themselves. Okay, I'm not saying that holds 100% true, but once again, the things that people complain about are very often the things that are going on with them. Okay. Similarly, if you're around somebody who complains about pedophiles all the time, watch your children around them. Okay, and if you have been complaining about pedophiles a lot, you might want to stop, because a lot of people know what projection is. Okay, and so and then of course deal with whatever it is that's causing you to complain about those things. Okay, so if you complain about theft a lot, examine your own propensity to steal. Maybe not literally in the terms of money from somebody's wallet, but in other ways: time, energy, food, something, I don't know, or uh, going to Starbucks and taking a whole handful of sweet and low and putting it in your purse. There are a couple of movies to look at here. The movie Titanic is a story about how to get um, out from under the control of energy vampires. The main one in the film being Rose's mother. So Rose, big spoiler alert, she does get away from her. Oops, ruined the film, right? So Rose does eventually get out from under the control of her energy vampire mother. Okay, but of course, her mother really isn't literally a vampire. But if the way that her mother treats her keeps happening, it's going to seem as if Rose's energy is being snuffed out or drained away. Okay, and what do these alleged energy vampires do? They use a lot of blame, like a classic narcissist. One of the telltale signs of a narcissist is that nothing is ever their fault. It's always somebody else's fault. Okay, this has to do with alexithymia. In other words, that lack of awareness or lack of a full range of awareness of emotion. Let's say, if you don't have a full range of awareness of emotion, then nothing's ever your fault. It's always like somebody else's problem, like because that personal self-awareness is lacking, and apparently these conditions are largely uncurable. Yeah, you cannot cure a narcissist, supposedly. You can give them training and therapy to help them adjust better, but they're probably going to suffer from this sort of alexithymia condition for the rest of their lives, most likely. I hate to say never, though, you know. Um, and these kinds of people, these narcissists or psychopaths or people who lack a full awareness of all of their emotions, they will tend to gaslight you. It's not they who are insane, it's you who are insane. And so if you are protesting because of the way they're treating you, there's something wrong with you. It's like, are you feeling okay? You you know you didn't used to complain so much before. Are you worried about something? Is there something from your childhood like bothering you? Like um, a lot of these things you're talking about, they're not even happening, right? So they'll make you feel like there's something wrong with you. And gaslighting is a very effective technique that they tend to use if you're vulnerable to it. They use guilt, of course, especially if they're mothers, right? They play upon insecurities, okay? Or they have rigid rules. And they have very specific expectations about how you should behave, okay? The main thing that's going on with them is a supreme lack of faith or lack of trust in who you are as a person. You have to be a certain way around them. And if you're not that way, they will use manipulation, guilt. They'll blame you for things. They'll accuse you of having something wrong with you. Okay, make you feel bad for trying to be you. It's another one here. This is from the Dead Poet Society. Also, a movie about how to get out from under the control of a psychic vampire. And this is a overly controlling father who basically has very definite plans for how the son is going to grow up. Okay. Now, how is this vampirism? This just doesn't seem like they're draining energy at all. Okay. But when to live with one of these people, you have to live up to their expectations, apparently, because they can play upon your insecurities and then sort of make you behave a certain way. Um, as you do that, as you put on a good face for them, that takes a lot of energy. So you have to repress who you really are, okay, which stifles your energy flow. And you have to exert energy becoming something that you might not be, that you're not. Okay. So that's you're exerting energy to become something that you're not, and you're stifling who you really are. You're throttling your own energy. So that gives the impression that your energy is being drained away because you start to get sick and your vitality goes down. And it's like this person is preying upon you. When in fact, what they're doing is they're triggering you to shut down your energy and to exert what little energy you have left towards becoming something that you don't even want to be. Yeah, so that's the energy vampirism. So it's not literally vampirism, it just feels that way. Now, these people that do these things, it might be better to back up for a second, okay, and not take this also literally, even in terms of who they are as like the psychopath or the narcissist or the invalid, okay? Um, the true energy vampires are within your own psyche, okay, and within theirs, okay? They have complexes going on within them, and you have complexes going on within you. And those complexes, we'll talk about what those are in a second, but those complexes are using up your energy in order to keep things a certain way. These are the true energy vampires because they're draining your energy away, creating a fake world around you. Okay? And these are the psychological complexes. Okay, that's a word I assume invented by Carl Jung or Freud. I'm not sure which ones. But to have a complex is pretty much to have a sort of program that's embedded in you that's now up and running and maintaining itself and using up energy to do that. Sort of like it's generating Bitcoin and it can't stop, and it's draining all these resources to generate more and more Bitcoin because it must have more Bitcoin because Bitcoin's really important, right? Because we have to get wealthy without doing any work. And well, okay, that's a computer example. So let's go into some of these psychological complexes. What are they? And particularly, which psychological complexes are the easiest to trigger? Okay, let's say if you're a narcissist and you want to pretty much lord over somebody and sort of derive satisfaction from controlling them, which complexes can you prey upon in order to do that? Okay, for instance, there are many complexes, like there's the Oedipus complex. That's not one that's going to make you particularly vulnerable to a psychic vampire. Okay, but there are many complexes that will, and most of the complexes will make you vulnerable to a psychic vampire. And before we get into that, psychological complexes, the way they're usually defined is something that happened to you as a kid and it's now scarred you for life, and it's created this permanent program within you that's now trying to compensate and make sure everything's okay because of what happened to you, and it's continuously trying to make everything okay. So it's draining your energy trying to do that, mainly because you were hurt a while ago. Okay, yes, that happens, of course. It's trauma, right? But these psychological complexes run much deeper than that. Okay, the entire human race is traumatized and has psychological complexes embedded within it that are from before we were born. These various phobias that we have inherited, the fears that we have inherited, are all the result of pretty much psychological complexes as well, if we're looking at it very deeply. Okay, and in the Eastern traditions, these are called samskaras. Okay, and the perpetuation of the programming that these samskaras have produced, the programming that's up and running now and draining energy, as we, for instance, if we have a fear of heights and we exert a lot of energy to avoid ever having to end up in a situation where we're in a where we're looking down at a very low landscape, exerting all that energy. So the samskara is the thing that originally happened to us, the original imprint. I don't know, witnessing somebody falling to their death, something like that, right? And then the vasana is the perpetuation of that, sort of running away from that fear, endlessly running away from that fear, and that which perpetuates that fear. Okay. Anyway, and that's how psychological complexes are made. It's just that the samskaras and the vasanas are very deep, and they exist all the way back to when we were single-celled organisms. And there might even be a cosmic dimension to them, all the way back to the Big Bang, or whatever that was, the big almost bang. And in the Western magical tradition, we make it simple. We call these things demons. Now, these things are very much alive. They're up and running. There's subroutines that are up and running. They have, and they even will arise and take on various forms and things like that. Okay. And these demons are shared between us. Okay. Now that's the interesting thing, because when we get into codependent relationships, people with similar demons then gravitate together, and the demons pretty much are constantly feeding off of each other, not feeding off each other literally, but triggering each other back and forth, back and forth. this person's trying to feel better, and then in order to do that, they do something to this person, which makes them feel inferior. So this person tries to feel better by doing something to this person, which makes them feel superior. But then, of course, the person they just victimized feels inferior, and they do back and forth, right? Interesting perpetuation going on there. And there are people who manipulate you almost consciously. I wouldn't want to say it's entirely conscious, though. And these are the narcissists and the sociopaths, and the people with alexithymia pretty much will sort of latch onto you and then begin making themselves feel superior to you by playing upon your insecurities, so they can look superior to you and feel better about themselves, and then you have to go through all this energy to try to prove them wrong, and then it's back and forth. And the way you can look at this then is that within each of us we have various vasanas, or we have these psychological complexes that are up and running, okay? And we can even say that these various psychological complexes will actually organize themselves into this sort of tree of life pattern. Does it really organize itself in your aura this way? No, but it's very helpful to map it out this way, to see where your psychological complexes might be sitting. Okay, not only to use this diagram, but to use various other types of diagrams to figure out like which parts of the body various types of shame are attached or tend to hover around, tend to manifest there. Okay. It's very helpful to be able to do that, because you can even work with that body part to try to get at that psychological complex, to sort of uproot it or to sort of explore it, to see what is this thing? What's it afraid of? What does it want? Oh, what does it really need? And how will it feel when it gets what it needs? Okay, so here are some of the various complexes that we have, the various samskaras or vasanas that we have. These can be used against you, more or less, okay? And so if a psychic vampire latches onto you in a sort of codependent relationship, these are probably most of the complexes that they are able to trigger in you. It's almost like they can nudge you into the shadow of one of these complexes. And the complex then pretty much takes you over and makes you compulsively do things, okay? So one of those complexes, the rejection complex, fear of rejection. Okay, and so you can end up in a relationship where a person will eventually start to reject you to get you to grovel on the floor in front of them and beg them to come back, and then they can feel better about themselves because it's like, oh, I'm awesome because he's trying to come back, and right. So and then things will get better again, and of course then they'll use the trick on you again to try to feel better about themselves, and then you will try to feel better about yourself by getting back together with them and not being rejected. Right? Okay. Same thing with abandonment. Abandonment's more general because fear of being abandoned or fear of being ostracized by your community. Okay, like for example, people who have an anxiety about speaking in public, doing public speaking, that's mostly a fear of banishment. Oh, if this whole group of people doesn't approve of me, then I'll be banished. And about a million years ago, being banished from a tribe was virtually a death sentence. And so we have this natural fear of being rejected by a group. Okay. There's other types of abandonment too, though, like just being left behind as a child. The whole tribe or the whole family runs up ahead, and you're like, you're lost. I can't find them. Oh my God, now I'm going to die, right? And so these kinds of fears of abandonment or being left behind can be played upon. by a psychic vampire. Okay, and then the energy that you exert trying to make yourself feel better that's what ends up draining you pretty much. Panel of judges. So a lot of us walk around through life as though we're constantly being judged by our community. Yeah, and that drains a heck of a lot of energy because we're probably even on some level imagining who these people are. Yeah, lots of mom and dad figures. Maybe there's this sort of, I don't know, federal judge type figure, probably I don't know, a shaman type figure in there. And they're all looking down disapprovingly at the things that you've just done. And it takes a lot of energy to generate these figures, right? And then to perform in a way before them that you think will please them. Yeah, that's a major drain on psychic energy, on your own psychic energy. Incidentally, when I say psychic, I mean psychological energy, your energy of your psyche. Okay, we should rescue the word psychic from the psychics. Okay, the realist. Well, people exert a lot of energy resisting a magical universe. I don't know if I want to go too deeply into that in this video, but the effort to cling to a real world and then to call yourself a realist, that takes a lot of energy. It's almost like treading water, trying to stay on the surface of everything and not letting yourself sink down to the depths. Okay, and yeah, one of the best ways to, I'm not going to go into that. So yeah, so you could be accused of not being realistic enough, and then there's something wrong with you, and somebody's gaslighting you then, especially if you are doing magical things, right? You're working with crystals, don't you know that's all ridiculous? I think you should go get some therapy because working with crystals, like there's crystals don't have any magical power, right? Magic doesn't exist. You know that Harry Potter stuff's not real, right? And that's somebody gaslighting you, pretty much. Inferiority complexes, they go right hand in hand with superiority complex. Okay, so they're both really the same. Okay, it's kind of like the little man syndrome, like or the Napoleon complex. When a man is really short, he might become especially he'll exert a lot of energy to be really tough, really strong, really disciplined, really hard-assed, to try to pretty much as though to compensate for the fact that he's so short or so little or so, I don't know, inferior. So if we have an inferiority complex, somebody could try to trigger that, and then we have to exert a lot of energy to try to feel better about ourselves again. As I say these things, you begin to see what a waste of energy. Like somebody has made you feel inferior, so now you need to prove yourself, right? Why bother? So the interesting thing also is that as I present these things, the cure for psychic vampirism becomes increasingly obvious. Brush these comments off. Like you cannot be hurt by somebody's trying to trigger one of your complexes. The point would be to become aware enough of when that's happening. And of course, the victim complex. This is something that exists among a lot of liberals. It exists among all of us, really, but especially liberals or the woke generation now. To walk around in a perpetual state of outrage because of what's been done to you and your race or your gender or whoever you identify as, and then to be offended and outraged and then exert a lot of energy to go after the people and make them feel bad for what they've done. Ooh, notice how you have become the psychic vampire now. How interesting. Okay. It doesn't mean that to be morally outraged is wrong, but to operate in this mode where you're constantly, perpetually ready to be offended is a huge drain on energy. Okay. I imagine somebody's going to blame me for blaming victims, right? All I'm pointing out is that when you become offended, it's a choice. You don't have to basically adopt an offended posture. I did a video on affrontedness. I think the video is called a single word that can help enlighten you faster. The whole thing about affrontedness, to walk around affronted all the time, that takes a lot of energy. Okay, and that affrontedness itself is a demon, a vampire demon that is sucking at your energy. It would be best to simply dissolve it and not have it flare to life so automatically. Loss aversion. A lot of conservatives suffer from that, which is also metathesiophobia. Fear of change. That's all that means, fear of change, right? So conservatives are known for holding on to past patterns and not wanting to give them up. Okay, and conservatives are kind of funny too, because it used to be that conservatives were very much into like country music and older like classical music styles and the values that we used to have in the 50s. But now the conservatives are into rap music and they're into and so in other words, they're just holding on to older patterns and they're not willing to let go of those older patterns yet. That's the essence of conservatism. Conservatism. Um, Thanatophobia, fear of death, is very much the same thing. For anybody who does tarot cards, usually the death card signifies change. Okay, so anybody who constantly says, "Oh, the world's all going to hell. It's not the way it used to be. Everything's doomed. Civilization is going to be destroyed. We need to have a total reset," or something like that. This is fear of change manifesting as a fear of death. As though if things change, it means I'm dying. So this resistance to change drains a lot of energy. And it's very ironic too, because to resist death is to resist change. And what is life but constant change? So if you want to feel alive, roll with the changes. Accept the changes. Don't resist, because you're going to stifle your own life force doing that. That's a tough one. Yeah. It's probably at the root of ego too, I would think. Yeah. So the ego complex at the bottom is essentially thanatophobia, yeah, fear of death. And the Promethean complex and the Faustian complex, I love these. Those are, the Faustian complex is pretty much wanting to achieve knowledge and power at a great cost. Are you willing to pay the price for enlightenment? Are you willing to pay the price for magical power? You have to surrender your soul to the devil, right? Or something like that. Prometheus, very much the same. Like he was willing to pay the ultimate price so that humans could have fire and knowledge and things like that. These are very much like the savior complexes. And probably one of the easiest targets for a psychic vampire, like a person who seems to be a psychic vampire, one of the easiest complexes they're on the lookout for is the savior complex. Somebody who is ready to swoop in and save them over and over again. Yes, my mother was becoming that for a while. She became an invalid for a while and was becoming increasingly reliant on me to take care of her. And at one point, I sort of snapped out of it. I was feeling more and more guilty about never doing anything right. And she had very strict guidelines for how I should mow the lawn and how I should clip the hedges and and exactly what groceries to buy. And if I bought the wrong ones, she made me feel really guilty about it, or tried to anyway. And at one point, I said this is getting out of hand. So I called her and said, "I'm not coming back. Not you need to take care of yourself. I know you can take care of yourself." And at that point, she even threatened to kill herself. I said, "You cannot hold yourself hostage in order to rope me in like this. I'm not going to let you do that." Heavy duty, I know. She did not kill herself. She got better. She started taking care of herself. The ultimate of the psychological complexes, or the samskara, whatever that, or vasana, is the sense of unsatisfactoriness, or the Buddhist term dukkha, that sense of suffering. So whatever's happening, it's not satisfying. So nope, still not happy. So there, as you go through the day, nothing ever seems right. I'm not quite there yet. I'm not there yet. Or when I do get what I want, it's not exactly the way I want it. And so occasionally I get something the way I want it, but then of course it doesn't last, and then it's not satisfying anymore. And now I don't know what to do. And now I'm back to the unsatisfactoriness again. This endless round of unsatisfactoriness. Okay, that is what a psychic vampire can latch onto. Okay, it is the mother of all psychic vampires, this sense of unsatisfactoriness that drives you to try to feel better. Makes you try to feel better all the time. And so you're trying to feel better, exerting all this energy to try and feel better. And of course, that trying itself is ruining everything and making you not feel better. So it's an onward struggle, and it's draining your energy, draining your life force to exert all this energy to make things better. That's the real psychic vampire. So it might be more frightening to think of the psychic vampire as something that exists inside you, not that person over there who you could accuse of draining your energy before. See, and now I'm not letting you get away with that anymore. You can't blame them for draining your energy. It's they are simply triggering a complex in you that is draining the energy. So the monster is actually inside you. And of course, it's inside them too. That's what attracted them to you. You both are psychic vampires. Yes, the call is coming from inside the house. And of course, a lot of what is happening is the urge to conform to some kind of societal expectation, tribal expectation, family expectation, or somebody holding you to some kind of rigid code of ethics. Okay. And then the shame that they can make you feel, or try to make you feel, when they can point out that you're not living up to whatever standards they are referring to. They're going to, if they're clever about it, in a sort of unconscious way, they're clever about it. They see what kind of standards of perfection you have for yourself, and then they can needle you for not living up to your own standards of perfection, or those the the bogus standards of perfection that have been programmed into you. They'll be aware of those, and they can try to trigger your guilt about not living up to those things. Okay. Yeah, one of the biggest complexes we have is I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. Yeah, on and on and on, right? And a psychic vampire will latch on to that one. and they will dangle the idea of you becoming good enough when you're with them, as long as you make them feel great about themselves. But when they start to get a need to feel better about themselves, they're going to needle you saying you're not good enough. And the only way you can get good enough is by groveling before me and doing as I say, or something like that. So the natural tendency when we're faced with psychic vampires, or even our own like internal demons, is to create boundaries. Okay. Now in psychology, that's pretty cool. Yeah, because we can create boundaries. So let's say if you have an invalid um, person in your family who requires care, and everybody's maybe trying to guilt you into being the one who takes care of that person, maybe because they can sense that you have a savior complex, which can be triggered, and you can then be manipulated into becoming the caretaker. Okay, and then you can put your own life on hold while you're dealing with this and helping this person. Okay, that often stems from um, the belief that you don't really amount to anything unless you're helping others. Okay, and so that belief can be played upon by a psychic vampire. Okay, and of course, one of the boundaries that you would then erect against something like that is to say, no, I'm not going to help you today. You're going to have to get that yourself, or you're going to have to find a way. I have to take care of myself too. This is a spirit of authenticity that takes over, to realize that, oh, I have needs too. And if I'm not taking care of somebody, I'm still worth something. I have my more. I'm still okay. Uh, Rather than, oh, if I'm not helping somebody or taking care of them, I don't amount to anything. Right? You can just you can eventually reprogram that belief into, no, I'm worth something no matter what I'm doing. Okay, or I'm basically just awesomely okay no matter what's happening. Okay, I don't have to be a good person to be a good person. I can be a good person just by being, not by doing as somebody tells me to do. Big difference there. And the interesting thing is that when we think of boundaries, we think, well, I have to do banishing rituals and create this like bubble of energy around myself, or this magic circle of protection against evil. Well, that kind of happens, yes, because when you do the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, it will eventually protect you from psychic vampires. Okay, but what actually happens at first is that it pushes these complexes, these various complexes, these demons, out into the periphery, the imaginary periphery, right? So that you can then become more aware of them objectively. They sort of get separated out from you. So in some sense, this actually works. So in some sense, you can see them more clearly. Okay, so everything kind of gets worse before it gets better when you're erecting these boundaries. Okay, all right, um, so somebody who's been doing banishing work for many, many years, they have strong boundaries that are very healthy. Okay, but it doesn't really come across as a boundary anymore. So if you insult them, it's not going to bounce off some kind of barrier. Okay, it would be better to describe it as it passes right through them, or it can't find a landing place within them. It can't stick. Okay, or it's like Teflon, it just simply splats against them and slides off, and there's no stain or anything like that. Okay, that would be a better example. And they cannot be roped into any activity um, by having one of their buttons pushed, because any of these various insults or attempts to rope people in with guilt, they don't find a landing place. Okay, the sense of being good enough is no longer a concern. Eventually, if you do this kind of banishing work and middle pillar work long enough, um, you don't have to prove anything to anyone, okay? Because there really isn't any you to maintain anymore. So it's not a matter of feeling like you're awesome and great no matter what people say. No, it's not about that. It's more a matter of there's really no me here to be awesome, or there's no me here to feel ashamed. There's no me here to feel awesome. There's just awesomeness coming through everything, everywhere. What you should not do, okay, this is for the psychic vampires that exist within you, okay, these various complexes or demons that are pretty much troubling you. Um, and it also goes for the people out there who you are tempted to refer to as psychic vampires, okay? For the people out there, well, stop blaming them. It's a really bad idea to blame people for stuff that's happening, even if they've just walked up to you and punched you in the face. Don't blame the person for doing that. It's the action it would be more accurate to go after the action. Okay, how did that happen? How did that arise? How do we keep that from happening again? Okay, there's nobody really there to blame for anything. Okay, the act of blaming a person or taking it personally, that's what a psychic vampire would do. Okay, and that is a vampiric act in itself, because you're now generating this enemy outside of yourself that isn't even there, and you're exerting energy to do that, to generate this imaginary foe, which you now need to somehow deal with. It's much more accurate to go after the actions or the things that are happening and just deal with those without exerting any extra energy at all to create imaginary boundaries and imaginary armor around yourself and imaginary good guys and bad guys. Okay, that takes too much energy. All right. Do not try to fix people's problems, because if you have a savior complex, that's one of the easiest targets for a person who seems to be a psychic vampire. They will latch on to anyone who seems to define their self-worth in terms of helping others, sort of like a Florence Nightingale complex, right? So if you try to fix their problems for them, you're going to get roped into a codependent relationship, and it's eventually going to start draining your energy. Doesn't mean you don't fix people's problems occasionally, okay? But don't get roped into a cycle where you're constantly fixing their, cleaning up their messes, okay? Uh, Even if you have kids, you eventually you wean them off of that. Obviously, when you have kids, you come to the rescue when they get in trouble, right? But eventually, you want to wean them off of that so they can get themselves out of trouble. It's a big lesson for kids today, I think, yeah, because kids today don't seem to be very good at getting themselves out of trouble. Don't propose solutions. If you want a psychic vampire to go away, start listening to them. And then, so it's like, oh, I think I see why you feel that way. In other words, if you really start to listen to them, the pain of their actual affliction as a psychic vampire or as a narcissist will start to come to the surface, and they will run for their lives. They will try to maintain their psychic vampire existence. If you really show empathy and listen to somebody rather than try to propose solutions or fix their problems, first of all, that will end up very likely helping them for real. But it will also possibly be too painful for them. So if they're not ready to get better or to help themselves, they will just run away and try to find somebody else who they can rope into fixing their problems for them. What should you do? Well, see, the goal is to be completely immune to psychic vampires. And that goes for the people out there who you might be tempted to accuse of being psychic vampires. as well as the psychic vampires that exist within your own psyche, these various complexes. Okay, in order to be free of them, you do shadow work, which is a Jungian term, and it's simply well, let's go down this list a bit. The best way I know to do that is to study animal evolution and human evolution. Okay, so evolutionary psychology is a really good topic for that, because any of the various fears or complexes that you notice that you have, let's say you have a fear of rejection, you have a fear of public speaking, you can then look, well, how did this fear arise? Oh my gosh. Well, it used to be that if the community disapproved of you and banished you, that would be like a death sentence. No wonder people are afraid of being rejected by a crowd of people. And then as you get up there to speak, you can remind yourself, this is not that situation. This is if they don't like me, nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to be banished from the community. I will survive. And so that emotional complex will go away, or it will change. Okay, it will become more sophisticated, let's say. Okay, because there might be a situation in which you could be banished from um, a community. I don't know how that would happen nowadays, but you could be sent to a penal colony or something like that, right? Or yeah, we don't really banish people anymore. But you could be, abandoned on a desert island, and then of course you have to fend for yourself, and then that emotional complex would be legitimate. Yeah. So knowing how these various complexes have evolved is very helpful, because then you become more aware of how they work. And when somebody tries to trigger one of them, it's like, well, that's not that fear. I feel it. I can see it. I know how it arose. It does not apply to the situation. So you cannot trigger me that way. Sorry. Okay, you can see how that works. So becoming fully aware of your fears or your emotional complexes, your samskaras and your vasanas. Okay, in the Western occult tradition, we could simply say you are now aware of your demons, the demons that pretty much are the ones that bother you. Some of us have more demons than others, and some of us have pet demons that's really hard to let go of. Yeah, and eventually we can make friends with them or dissolve them entirely. Doing magical diary work, very helpful. So as these fears and complexes come up, you come up with names for them, and as they appear and trouble you, you talk about them, you work through them, you speculate as to how they might have evolved. You help these various complexes themselves evolve and become more nuanced. Okay, in which case they might dissolve entirely, or they might simply morph into something else. Who knows? Yeah, or I don't know, diversify, become several different entities. Yeah, cool stuff can happen. Doing literal, doing actual demon summoning work. So in other words, you do magical evocation where you visualize demons and you have conversations with them, and you ask them the three questions: what do you want? What do you really need? And how will you feel when you get what you really need? Yeah, I have an article in Forbidden Realms. I think it's Meditation's Dark Side. I think it's called that. And in that article, I disclose a means of conjuring demons so that you can conjure up one of these complexes so that it can dissolve permanently. Perhaps even in a single ritual, you could dissolve it permanently or almost permanently so that it won't bother you again, and a psychic vampire won't be able to trigger it and manipulate you. You'll be immune to manipulation. This also amounts to being immune to hypnosis. And I did a video on hypnosis where pretty much how do we become hypnotized? Basically through our demons. We are invited to become this or that entity in this particular scenario, and we really buy into it, don't we? We can anyway. Yeah. And this happens because of our samskaras and our vasanas, our demons, our unconsciousness. And amor fati is a goal. That's Latin for love of one's fate. And that's simply a word that means no matter what happens, I'm okay with it. Okay. Or I even, whatever's happening, I embrace it. I welcome it. Okay. So, let's see, my building where I'm living is being condemned. I'm going to lose my home. And I can't even sell it, or, oh no, what am I going to do? To welcome that, it sounds kind of cheesy, but probably the easiest way to do that is to say, this is a new challenge. I wonder what's going to happen from this. Okay, I remember there was an author, Jan Van Zant. Her way of saying it was, I can't wait to see the good that's going to come out of this. Something like that, right? Um, and that's basically it's a means of having faith, not faith in God or Jesus or even in yourself, just uh, faith that things work out. They work themselves out somehow. Okay, not the way you necessarily want. And remember, one of the best ways to be a psychic vampire is to insist that everything be a certain way. Okay, so remember what Rose's mother in the Titanic was like, or what the father of the kid who died in the Dead Poet Society, what he was like. Those are psychic vampires. Everything must be this way, the way I say. Yeah. And so the antidote to that is amor fati. Whatever's happening, I accept it. And whoever I'm with, I trust them to be themselves. They don't have to behave a certain way for me. I'm actually interested to see what they're going to do next. Okay, I might not like it, and I might get away from it, which is fine. But it's still all very interesting. Yeah, I trust that whatever is going to happen is going to work itself out. This is a much different way of living in the world, and it's completely the opposite of a psychic vampire. All right, so if you are somebody who complains about psychic vampires or psychic attack, this means that you yourself have the characteristics of a psychic vampire or a psychic attacker. All right. There's going to be some interesting comments, I can tell. And so we're back to this image again. One of the takeaways then would be that, remember, the original idea of the psychic vampire is that they're out there and they're ready to prey upon my energy. And now we look at this again. No, this is this woman here. If she's not a psychic vampire herself, she's these vampires around her are in her psyche, in her aura, and they are these little programs that are up and running, trying to maintain some kind of fictional reality, and they require energy to do that. She's got a lot of them going on, doesn't she? Yeah, that just drains her energy. And when she learns to let go of these or become friends with them, and not have not be so dependent upon them, she has more and more energy to just be authentically who she is. Okay, and when that happens, letting go of all of these energy drains, there's a certain purity that comes over you. It's authenticity, which helps manifestation happen. So you live in a world of synchronicity more and more. and your wishes begin to manifest around you. And you don't even have to do a special ritual to get a particular thing that you want. It just happens. Okay, so the real goal of the magical work then is not to reach a point where you can then cast powerful spells or things like that necessarily, though that is possible, sort of. It's more that you just reach a point where things are manifesting just fine. Okay, and you don't have all these other things that are draining energy off of that manifestation process. They are mostly gone. That is the goal, really, for becoming the adept in the Golden Dawn tradition. All right, so I don't think I'm not too worried about making that unclear this time around. However, I know that people tend to say that I tend to say that magic is merely psychological. That's a shame, because what that shows is a sort of split between psychology and everything else. Psychology is a study of the soul, okay? Psychology. Ology is study of, and psych is the soul. And the soul is not something that I regard as being within a person necessarily, like you have a soul which you can sell to the devil or something like that. It's the soul of the world. It's the soul of everything. So we are studying the psyche of the world or of the universe, which is alive, and we are manifestations of that living thing. What could be more magical than that? So to approach magic in the language of psychology is perfectly natural to do. Okay, and of course we can go much further than standard psychology, especially psychology the way it's happening lately in terms of brain science. I would much rather restore psychology to the study of the soul, the study of the psyche, and that's not the individual psyche necessarily, but the soul of the world. Okay, so I hope that rescues magic from being merely psychologized. Anyway, until next time.